The population that we work with at the House of Mercy is primarily the chronically homeless or the hard to serve homeless, and there is quite a bit of alcohol and drug abuse, and there is quite a bit of mental illness. I think, I think the numbers nationally are something like 70 to 80% of people that are chronically homeless are experiencing either one or both of those things. So it's pretty common. We have a lot of wonderful shelters in Rochester who do a great job. They tend to have higher barriers, as we would describe, to get into them. They have more rules. There's a little bit more structure, which is great because I think that's what some people need, is the structure of those shelters. The House of Mercy is known more as a low barrier shelter, which doesn't mean we don't have rules. It just means we have fewer rules that are kind of targeted directly for this population. So you're not allowed to use drugs in the building. You're not allowed to bring in weapons. You're not allowed to be violent or belligerent. Those kind of things will get you kicked out, so to speak. We probably are a little bit more forgiving as well if someone were to break the rules, rather than kicking them out for 30 days or 60 days. We may say, go take a walk for the next 6 hours, cool off, and come back. It's amazing when you sit with people. What you learn is you can quickly separate a person's behavior from the person, and you see that people have what we would perceive as negative behaviors. But if you spend time with people, you can see that you can separate those two, and you can actually enjoy someone and be friends with them and enjoy their company, even though their behaviors may not be socially acceptable, or their behaviors may be dangerous to themselves or other people. The guy who came in yesterday, I did an intake. He has 4 kids. He's 38 years old. He's separated from his wife, and he's kind of had an on and off problem with crack. But he worked 15 years as a mason, and separated from his wife. He had his own apartment, and he started smoking crack again. Lost his job, and then lost his apartment, and ended up at House of Mercy about 3 days ago. So he's an example of someone he's not known as like a chronically homeless person. He's someone that kind of has probably been in and out of the system a little bit, but for the most part has been housed throughout his life. So dealing with the red tape, for example, I helped him fill out an application for DSS, for food stamps, for Medicaid, and it's a very confusing, probably 12-page long application. And so I think, to be honest, it's probably something he could have filled out himself if he sat down and had the time to do it. But when I asked him, he said, no, could you help me with it? And so just sitting down with him and kind of going over the questions, kind of guiding him in how to answer the questions, and then at some point we'll probably give him a ride where he can hand in the application, go with him to the appointment, because sometimes those appointments can be pretty daunting, and dealing with the bureaucracy that is social services, county social services, can be pretty overwhelming. So really acting as kind of like an advocate for people when they go to those appointments, trying to get their benefits, those kind of things. So that's one way we deal with bureaucracy. Sanctuary Village was a response to the closing of the Civic Center garage to people that live there. So for almost 20 years, some people think more than that, 20 to 30 people lived in the Civic Center garage, which was our only heated garage. In August of last year, 2014, the entity that runs the garage decided to close it to homeless people. So everyone who lived there was forced to move out. We subsequently created Tent City, which was then called Sanctuary Village, which then led to Sanctuary Village, which was our indoor temporary shelter. There was a fair amount of controversy around the closing of the Civic Center garage, around Tent City, around Sanctuary Village. It really kind of goes back to this idea of chronic homelessness and the barriers that certain shelters have. I think there probably are enough shelter beds by number for the people that are homeless, probably. But the issue becomes the barriers to get into those shelters. And once you're, like if I go into one of the shelters and I run into some trouble and I get kicked out, I immediately can get sanctioned because those shelters are paid for by the county. Most shelter beds are paid for the county. So if I get kicked out of this shelter for doing something, I immediately become sanctioned and can't go to any other shelter after getting kicked out of this. So for 30 days, I'm kicked out of this shelter and all the other shelters. So we became probably a bad analogy, but it's almost like the funnel, where where people were unable to go to other shelters for one reason or another. Some people it was by choice; they weren't sanctioned, but they didn't. They had trouble just adhering to the rules and regulations of the shelter. Would come to Sanctuary Village. So yeah, there's no question for the 3 months or so that Sanctuary Village was open. It was definitely a needed resource for people. That there should always be, like, regardless of someone's behavioral issues or mental health status or anything like that, there should always be a place that they can go to that they know will be warm and it will be welcoming and it will be compassionate. I think that's not only the humane thing to do, but it's as a social worker, as an MSW, it's also it's proven to be clinically effective. The best way to help someone get off their feet is to have a place to engage with them. So if they're living in tents or living under bridges, it's much harder to engage with those people. Where if I provide this warm shelter, warm both physically and emotionally and spiritually, then they're going to come to it, and I'm going to be able to interact with them more and help them get back on their feet, find a job, housing, things like that.